Welcome to Outside Views, and today we're delving into one of the key political debates currently shaping the future of Britain. Keir Starmer's EU reset plan and the warnings that it may not be enough to save the UK's struggling economy. This topic is dominating headlines this month, and it raises critical questions about Brexit, but also the UK's current economic challenges and whether the Labour government is doing enough to address them. Let's start by setting the scene. Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, has been pushing what he calls an EU reset plan. We talked about this, and which essentially aims to rebuild and strengthen the UK's relationship with Europe without reopening the divisive issue of Brexit itself. But here's the problem. Starmer's approach of simply making Brexit work is being increasingly criticized as insufficient. His chief negotiator on EU affairs, Nick Thomas-Symonds, recently sent a letter to the European Movement, a pro-EU campaign group, which confirmed that Starmer is focused on managing the post-Brexit situation, but has no intention of taking more radical action, such as rejoining the single market or the customs union, which would be close to impossible at the moment anyway. This letter, seen by The Independent, has only added fuel to the fire. It's clear that Starmer wants to move forward by working with the EU, but without revisiting the key elements of Brexit. And that's where the criticism comes in. So let's break this down. On one side, you've got the Labour government talking about strengthening ties with Europe, tackling trade barriers, and developing a broad-based security pact. And they want to turn the page on Brexit, focus on reinvigorating alliances, and avoid the divisions of the past. Sounds reasonable, right? But here's the catch. Many critics, including those within the pro-EU camp, believe that Starmer's plan lacks the ambition necessary to actually fix the economic damage Brexit has caused. And this is where the issue becomes more complex. The UK economy is still feeling the heavy impacts of Brexit. From trade barriers to delays at the border, the ongoing fallout is far from over. And just days before Thomas-Symonds' letter, the UK and the EU had to delay the introduction of a new Brexit digital border system due to fears that it would lead to rotting fruit and vegetables stuck at the border, waiting to be processed. And that's just one small example of the many economic disruptions Brexit continues to cause. And let's not forget the broader context. The UK economy has been under immense strain, with inflation, labour shortages, and trade disruptions all contributing to a difficult financial environment. So, while Starmer talks about making Brexit work, many are asking the question, is that even possible? Dr. Marc Galsworthy, the chair of the European Movement, has been quite vocal about this issue. He argues that simply sloganizing about making Brexit work isn't going to be enough to fix the economy. In fact, polling shows that a large portion of the British public now prioritizes the economy over the red lines set by Starmer's government. Galsworthy and others like him are calling for a more forward-looking approach, one that actually assesses where the UK is economically and where the opportunities for future growth might lie in its relationship with the EU. What they are advocating for is a proper inquiry into how the UK can move forward, not just in terms of repairing the damage done, but also in terms of seizing new opportunities. But here's where things get tricky for Starmer. His government has set clear red lines. They've ruled out any return to the single market, the customs union, or freedom of movement. In their view, reopening those debates would only further divide the country. So Starmer's approach is to focus on strengthening ties with Europe without fundamentally altering the Brexit deal. But can that approach actually deliver the economic recovery the UK so desperately needs? This is a question that, of course, has no easy answers. One of the key issues that's being raised is the youth mobility scheme. And this scheme, which could allow free travel for those under 30 between the UK and the EU, is still one of the proposals on the table. It's seen as a way to ease some of the barriers that Brexit has created, especially for young people who want to live and work across borders. But the letter from Thomas Simmons didn't address this issue in any meaningful way. And that's left many campaigners frustrated. They argue that there's a real opportunity here for the UK to rebuild ties with Europe in a way that benefits both sides, particularly when it comes to mobility and cooperation between young people. And yet, Starmer's government seems reluctant to embrace these more ambitious proposals. Instead, they are sticking to a cautious step-by-step approach, which, while pragmatic, may not be enough to generate the kind of economic boost that's needed. And now, let's talk about trade barriers. One of the biggest criticisms of Brexit has always been the impact it's had on trade. The delays, the added bureaucracy, and the higher costs, they all have been a constant source of frustration for businesses on both sides of the channel. And while Starmer's government has acknowledged these issues, their solutions have been seen by many as too slow and too limited. In the letter to the European movement, Thomas Simmons talks about wanting to tackle barriers to trade, but there's no clear plan yet for how that will be achieved. And without a more comprehensive strategy, it's hard to see how these trade disruptions will be resolved anytime soon, or can be resolved at all. The reality is Brexit has created a whole host of challenges that can't be fixed by simple tweaks or half measures. And for many critics, what's really needed is a bold rethinking of the UK's relationship with the EU, one that goes beyond trying to make Brexit work and actually starts to address the underlying issues that Brexit has caused. But Starmer's government is walking a fine line. They don't want to reopen the Brexit debate in a way that could reignite old divisions, and they certainly don't want to be seen as betraying the voters who supported leaving the EU. At the same time, they cannot ignore the growing calls for a more ambitious approach to repairing the UK's economy. And that's the balancing act we are seeing play out in real time. So, where does this leave us? Keir Starmer's EU reset plan is clearly well-intentioned. It's an attempt to move forward, to rebuild relationships with Europe, and to address at least some of the economic damage caused by Brexit. But is that enough? That's the question on everyone's mind. For many, the answer is just no. The Labour government's cautious approach, while pragmatic, may not be enough to save an economy that is still grappling with the long-term effects of Brexit, and not to forget there are still transitional periods running. And what critics are calling for is a more forward-thinking strategy, one that's willing to go beyond the red line set by Starmer and actually explore new ways of strengthening the UK's ties with Europe. Whether that involves revisiting issues like freedom of movement, or simply finding more innovative solutions to trade and mobility challenges, remains to be seen. But what's clear is that the UK's current economic woes can't be solved by slogans alone. Making Brexit work might be a nice soundbite, but the reality is far more complex. And until we see a more ambitious plan from the government, the question of whether this EU reset can truly fix the UK's economy will remain unanswered. As always, thanks for watching Outside Views, and we would love to hear your thoughts on this topic, so please leave your comments below the video. Do you think Starmer's plan is enough to save the economy, Or is it time for a more radical approach? Let us know what you think. So stay informed, stay engaged, and don't forget to question the narratives you are being told. Until next time, and the next video is right here in the end screen.